Hey guys, welcome back to my Heart Breathings channel. I am so excited to finally be bringing to you this plotting series. So today marks the beginning of an 8-part series on how to plot your novel. I'm going to be sharing with you all the tips, tricks, and tools that I have used to plot and write and publish over 25 novels so far. So let's get into it. So today's video is going to be more of just an overview of what we're going to be talking about in this plotting series and how it's going to come about. But I also wanted to talk to you just for a minute about why I plot and why I find it useful. When I first got started as a writer, I really had no idea what I was doing. I think that most of us have some innate idea of storytelling because we've watched movies, we've read books most of our lives, we've been immersed in storytelling in all kinds of ways, from people marketing to us, to parents telling stories to us, to everything that we consume in terms of books and movies and TV shows and stuff like that. So you kind of already have this innate sense of how a story ebbs and flows. But when it comes time for you to actually create that story out of nothing more than your brain, it can get a little bit more confusing, because instead of having someone else make the decisions for you, you're the one making all of those decisions. Now, I know that there are a lot of people who are able to just get a spark of an idea and they just start writing. And wherever the story takes them, they just follow that story. And in the publishing or in the writing world, people call those people pantsers. That's because they fly by the seat of their pants. They just go where the story takes them. And for a lot of people, this method works. So if pantsing works for you and that's what you like to do, and you feel like you're coming up with a cohesive story at the end that you just really love and it's following kind of the basics of story structure, then don't mess with your process. Everybody has a different process. So don't feel that you need to plot or that you have to plot just because other people are doing it. You always, as a writer, need to be doing, whether it comes to your publishing or your writing or anything in your life, you should be doing what works for you and what speaks to you. If you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you know that planning and organizing things speaks to me. So I really need that structure. If I don't have some basic idea of where my story starts, where they are tangled up in the middle, and then how it ends, usually for me some kind of twist or special little epilogue where there's another little boom twist or something you didn't see coming at the end. If I don't know where those characters end up or a little bit about their journey, I can't start writing. Even if I have a spark of an idea, it's very difficult for me to get out of my head and start just free flowing. I end up actually wasting a lot of time writing scenes that I end up throwing out. And I think that a lot of pantsers actually end up throwing out a lot of stuff, but they explore their drafts. If you are a pantser, please feel free to comment down below and kind of talk about your process. But for me, what I have found helps me be the most efficient when I'm writing is to outline my story ahead of time. And that includes knowing a lot about my characters and what they're going to be going through, their basic character arc and their character inner journey. And then I need to know the basic structure, kind of like I need to have a blueprint. The house doesn't have to be built yet. It doesn't have to be set in stone. I just need to have that sort of blueprint or that map to how I'm going to make my way through the story. Now, with that being said, the resources and tools and tricks that I am going to share with you in this series, most of them are not things that I have made up. Things like the 3-act structure have been around in storytelling since the very beginning of storytelling. This is like thousands of years old that stories have been told in this manner. So I'm not taking credit for any of this stuff. What I'm doing is I'm bringing together all of the resources that have worked best for me and giving you a little bit of a taste of each one of them. In the back of a resource that I'm going to have for you to download, there is going to be a resource list of my favorite plotting books and the things that I'm going to talk about throughout this series. I highly recommend that you go and pick these up wherever you can find them. A lot of them are going to be available in your library. Some of them may only be available on Amazon, but most of them should be available pretty much everywhere you can get ebooks. So please go and check out these books, really dig deeper and dive deeper into what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the 3-act structure and the doorway of no return and the mirror moment, and these sort of things will make a lot more sense to you if you go and actually read the books that I read to get these resources, if that makes sense. So most of this is going to be just a gathering of information and resources that I have pulled from in order to get better at my own plotting process. A lot of this stuff, as I was reading more and more about how to plot over the years, I realized I was doing intuitively anyway, but knowing how to do it and knowing the tools and the actual structure of the story has freed me to really come up with even tighter storytelling, even tighter weaving of that inner journey with the outer journey. And it's really made my stories a lot stronger along the way. And it's helped me to write multiple POV books. So when I first started out writing, I was only writing one single POV for the first 6 books in my Shadow Demon saga, which back then was called the Peachful High Demon series. And what I started to realize at the end of book 6 was that keeping everything in Harper's point of view was starting to limit me, because I could only see and know what Harper could see and know. And the world was expanding so much, I needed to tell more. So when I started book 7 of my series, I decided to branch out to 4 different points of view. And in order to really tightly structure 4 points of view in a single story, you have to understand story structure. And even if you're pantsing it, I think it actually might be much more difficult to pants a multi-POV story. When I'm talking about more than 2 points of view, I don't know. Feel free to comment down below if you're happily pantsing 4, 5, 6 POVs in a story. But I think that when you look at some of the people that have gotten really famous and epic series with multiple points of view, you're looking at George R.R. Martin and Robert Jordan, and even J.K. Rowling, even though hers was more an omniscient with tightening in on some places. She had those multiple viewpoints in the Harry Potter series. All of these people have plotted ahead and they knew kind of where they were going with the story. So I think that especially if you're writing more than 1 or 2 points of view, it's important to have some of these plotting tools. As with anything, take what you can use out of what you learn through this series and ignore the rest. What works for you works for you. And hopefully some of these tools will help make that click for you, because I know that especially as new writers, but even 20 plus books in, one of the main things that can hold us back is not knowing where to go next with the story. Because I think it's one of those things where you don't even realize until you really get into it that, oh my gosh, this is 100% up to me and what I decide to do. And there's infinite possibilities. So what do I do? Sometimes I still will spend weeks thinking about what happens next in a scene or where I want to go with characters. But I have found that the more tools I gather on how to be a great plotter and really good at outlining and understanding my characters and their journey, the better and faster I get at writing my rough drafts and making them really cohesive, tighter stories. And it opens me up to be more emotional in my stories, because I can really meld the outer action with that inner character journey and make it resonate a little bit more. And I hope to even get better with this. So what I have put together is a free download for you that will be up on my website. I'm calling it Plot Your Novel. Very unique. And this is basically a guide that you can download that will have things about the character's inner journey. And it will take us through all the way through the plotting process. And it's like a form that you can fill out. And this is almost the exact thing that I use for myself. I tweaked it a little bit and have added to it. And now I've printed it out to help me plot my latest book that I'm working on now. But I will be taking you through this entire workbook. But just keep in mind that some of the terms and some of the, this one's kind of marked up, but this box on goal, motivation, and conflict is not my invention. This comes from Deborah Dixon's Goal, Motivation, Conflict book, which I will link for you down below. It'll be linked on my blog, and it's also in the back of this as a resource. So I can touch briefly on how I use it, but if you really want to dive deeper into how you really set up that box for goal, motivation, and conflict, you'll need to pick up her book, because these are her ideas, not mine. I'm just sharing with you the things that I have learned and how I use these tools. So I just want to make that clear. All right, so we'll just talk briefly about the structure of this 8-part video series. You're on video number 1, which is more like the overview and introduction. On Sunday, I will post my Writing Great Characters video, which will be video number 2. And it's going to take you through some of the resources that I've found that help me to really get a good idea of what my characters are going through, what they want on an external level, but what they really need to experience on an internal level. It helps me to work through what themes these characters might be going through. And this will be useful for you whether you're writing a single POV character or multiple POV characters. You'll want to follow through this with everyone who is a point of view character. Then we're going to, in number 3, which will come out a week from today, you will get an overview of Act 1. I work, as most storytellers do, off of the 3-act structure, which means you've got an Act 1 where you're introduced to the characters, you're introduced to the situation and the world as it appears now. You're introduced to the stakes, like if things go wrong, what's at stake here? Is death at stake? Is the whole fate of the world at stake? Or is somebody's job at stake? If someone doesn't fall in love with the right person, is their happiness at stake? But you learn what's at stake very early in the story. You've got the hook and you're introduced to the story and the characters and the major conflict of the story. And then at the end of Act 1, there's always some kind of key event that many authors or many people that talk about plotting will call the doorway of no return. And your character will make a decision that will force them into a certain type of action. And of course, I'm going to go into this in much greater detail in my Act 1 video. Then they are taken into Act 2. And Act 2 is the meat of your book. This is the longest act of the book, and it makes up the majority of what people would say is the promise of the premise. This is what your book is actually about. So Act 1 is the setup and the introduction of the characters, the stakes, the conflict. And then Act 2 is where your character is tested. It's where they're taken through a journey of learning about their new environment. Some people will call this, beginning of Act 2 into moving into the new world. Life as they know it is over, and now they're moving into a new world where they're being tested, they're learning new things, they're meeting new people, they're facing these certain conflicts. So the way that I have learned it is really to break Act 2 into 2 pieces. So Act 2 Part 1 will be another video, that's video 4, and video 5 will be Act 2 Part 2, because they're so big, they deserve kind of a piece of their own. And right there at the end of Act 2 Part 1 is something that people call the midpoint, or it can also be called the second plot point, and I've also heard it called the mirror moment by James Scott Bell, which I'll be talking about some of his books coming up as well. This is a moment where everything in your story changes. It flips on its head, some new revelation, a terrible defeat, and we'll go more into that. But there's always this big event that happens right there in the middle of the story, in the middle of Act 2, that is going to set up the rest of the story. Then Act 2 Part 2, we will move into basically your character reaction to that midpoint, and then everything that's going to set them up to make that final battle or final climax of the book inevitable. So that second part of Act 2 is like everything getting ready. Your character needs to know the skills, they need to discover the clues, they need to, like a lot of times in a romance, that midpoint moment will be the first time your characters have had sex, or the first time that they've kissed or gone out on a real date, or the first time they've realized that they're actually in love with each other. And then the second part of Act 2 is where things start to go wrong. The girlfriend appears, or the ex-girlfriend appears. Some kind of conflict that was introduced in the beginning of the story starts to get more important over here, a lie that was told, or some kind of misunderstanding. So you'll start to see that when I go through the part of Act 2, Part 2, but everything there kind of leads straight to what happens at the end of Act 2, Part 2, which is another doorway, another choice, another decision, or another revelation or realization that leads us into what we call the black moment, or the long dark night of the soul, where everything feels like it's lost in an action. This could be when your character is captured and there seems to be no way out. In a romance, this is where your characters break up and it seems like there's just no way they're going to be together. But it seems like everything is lost and the story is never going to come together. The characters are never going to get what they want or what they need. And then there's the final climax, that final battle for what they believe in, for who they are, everything that's at stake. Now we're going to fight for it. And so you've got that climax and final battle, and then you have the resolution, hopefully, usually happily ever after, or at least some sort of happy for now that leads you into the next book if you're writing a series. And we're going to talk about that, whether you're writing a series or whether you're writing standalones and stuff like that throughout this plotting series. But you kind of get that overview of you've got the introduction, and we're introduced to the stakes. Then you've got this boom, this inciting or key event that changes things for your character, and now they're in the new world, and their reaction to that is the beginning of Act 2, Part 1, and they're learning new things, they're meeting new people, they're introduced to this new set of circumstances in their world, and then boom, at the end of Act 2, Part 1, they've got this midpoint that suddenly things are not what they seem, and so you've got another like climax, and then Act 2, Part 2, they're reacting to that climax. They are gathering the tools they need. They are learning new things. They're fighting even more intense battles or getting closer to that final battle. Then at the end of Act 2, Part 2, something else happens that spurs them into or makes it inevitable, this complete loss and final battle that they have to go through in Act 3. So that's the basic story structure of pretty much all stories that have ever been written. Now, literary fiction, I will not be speaking to because I don't know as much about like literary fiction and what the story structure is for those books, because I know it can be a lot different than following genre fiction, but most of us are writing genre fiction, and that's what my expertise is. I write a lot of action type stories, fantasy with villains where the world is at stake type things, and young adult horror type stories. And then I also have romances where it's a little bit more personal and more character driven. And I've written both types of stories, so I'm going to speak a little bit on those. Then in video 7, so we'll have gone through, let's see, the overview is 1, characters is the second one, Act 3, Act 2, Part 1, Act 2, Part 2 is video number 5. Video 6 will be Act 3. Video 7 will be bringing it all together, and that's where we'll discuss kind of some of the differences you might have based on whether you're writing a series where there's going to be a next book in the series, or whether you're writing book 9 or 10 in a series like I am, versus if you're writing a romance or a standalone or a mystery. So we'll talk about how genre impacts that, and we'll talk about how to bring together all those things that you did in the character arc with everything that you've now done in your plotting and your outlining. And then video 8 is going to be a video on what happens if you get stuck, because I know for me, often I actually will have the whole thing plotted, and then I'll get like to the end of Act 1 and things aren't where I thought they were going to be in the plot, or the characters just aren't cooperating and they aren't doing what I want them to do. So I have to make some changes. So it's like, what happens if you get stuck? How do you change it? Do you have to stick to your outline? We'll address all those different things. So I am very excited about running this plot series for you. I hope that you will get something out of it. Again, I certainly don't know everything. I am constantly reading new books on plotting, going to workshops and listening to what other people have to say about plotting, because there's still so much to learn. Even after writing 25 plus novels, I feel like I'm still just a newbie at this, and I still have so far to go to get my stories even better and even more tightly plotted. If you have any great resources that I have not mentioned or that I don't mention in this, then please feel free to share those in the comments or on my blog at heartbreathings.com. So for all of these 8 videos that will be going up, including today's video, I will have a link to this, I don't know if you can see it in the light, to this Plot Your Novel workbook that will be on my website at heartbreathings.com/blog. Should be where you'll get it, because I'll have a blog post up on this, but I will link it down below for you so you can run and get that. If you are already signed up for my mailing list, you won't be able to get it by signing up again, but if you check your email, then I have sent you an email today that has a link to directly download this Plot Your Novel workbook, so you can download it directly from there if you're already on my list. If you're not on my list, head over to the link down below or heartbreathings.com/blog, and you can sign up for my mailing list and download this Plot Your Novel workbook for free. And in that workbook is all these things I've talked about and we're going to be working through as a group over the next few weeks, as well as that list of resources where you can download and read these books that have helped me and that I will be referencing throughout this training series. All right, guys, so that is a basic overview of what we're going to be talking about. I am really excited to share this stuff with you, and I hope that it will help you in your plotting journey, because I know that for me, in the beginning, it seemed really overwhelming. Like, how do I make up an entire 90,000 word story out of nothing but my imagination? But it can be such a fun journey for you to go through as a writer. And I'll be showing you all the tools and tricks that I have learned over the years, and hopefully you'll be sharing yours with me. Then I also will be showing you how I bring this all together in my planning as well. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this coming up. I will be putting up a video on Thursdays and Sundays, but sometimes the Sunday video will not be part of this plotting series. So just check your email or make sure that you are subscribed to my channel and click that notification bell so that you'll be notified the minute a new video goes up from me. Thank you all so much for joining me in this plotting series, and I can't wait to see you in my next video. Bye.